How's this for a new venue? I heard all of you. This is the video that everybody's been waiting for. Shall we look at my mother's plants? Hi, my name is Memo. This is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of my mother's big passion behind me today. It's tropical houseplants. So yes, I did hear all of you on the previous videos saying you would love to see some of my mother's plant collection. So this video is going to be an interesting one for me to edit, because I'm now in Greece and this is her balcony in Greece. These are arguably her youngest plants, and I will move out of the way so you might be able to see it. I know some of it might be blown out, but I'm on a balcony, so there's only so much I can do about the sun. And hey, it's sunny, which considering that I live in the UK most of the year, this is a good thing. But yeah, I'll show you and talk you through some of the plants that she's got here. I'll pick you up and give you some close-ups as well and give you some of the background as to how she's been growing some of these plants. And hopefully there'll be a second part of the video because I am heading off to Cyprus in a couple of days' time, and she's got much more of her established plants there, both in the house, on the balcony, and in the garden. So it'll be interesting to see how I might be able to intersperse that. I might have to do some voiceover. I've already got some clips as well from one of our holiday homes in the Peloponnese, and some of the houseplants that are growing as garden plants. So we'll see how this all goes. This might be a slightly long video, apologies in advance. But yes, some background. So my family lives basically half the year in Greece and half the year in Cyprus. My parents travel backwards and forwards every other month, more or less, because their work is within kind of tourism, basically. So it kind of makes sense for them to be going backwards and forwards all the time for work purposes, which means that they've got two bases of homes, essentially. So this is, as I said, the balcony of my parents' house in Athens. We are very, very coastal. I'll see if I can maybe insert a clip so you can see quite how close we are to the beach. It's about a 2 to 3 minute walk from my house straight onto the beach, basically. So it's not that far at all. But there's a different kind of quality of plants here versus Cyprus. Cyprus tends to be a bit closer to Africa, and you tend to get much warmer, sunnier days there and much more humidity. Athens tends to be more traditional of what you might think of a Mediterranean climate. Now, my parents were meant to still be here, and I was planning on filming this a couple of days later, but unfortunately my father got a massive abscess on his jaw, so they had to change their flights and move them to a bit earlier to head back to Cyprus, so he can pretty much get off a flight, get in a taxi, go straight to the dentist and go in for that dental surgery. Apologies if you hear any noise. There are building works all around me, and I'm really hoping this is not going to cause me an issue in editing. Fingers crossed for me. So yes, let's have a quick look behind me in terms of the plants my mother's got on the balcony. I will talk you through them individually, and then I'll kind of take you up close. You might not be able to see right down below here, but there is a large kind of squat pot of ivy, just kind of your standard kind of English ivy. Right here, you might be able to see, yes, you can, my mother's tiny propagation, which isn't that tiny anymore, of her Monstera deliciosa. I will be showing you the mother plant of this in Cyprus, which is considerably larger, absolutely stonking ridiculous, but this is doing quite well. You might also be able to see, so that is the balcony, that's where the sun comes in, that is the back of the balcony, and you can kind of see how far back it is pulled. And this is winter as well now. The one thing that you might be able to see at the very top there is I think they're called awnings. And they come down. If they're not called awnings, I'll see what they're called and I'll add them at the top. But they all come down, and predominantly in the summer, they tend to be down all the time. So this is kind of adjustments that you would make if you were growing in a warmer climate on a balcony. What you might do in the winter is you might lift up things like awnings to let a bit more light in, or maybe even push the plants further back. And then obviously times like the summer, they still need that bright indirect light. But if the awnings were up, you basically would scorch half of these houseplants because the light would be so intense for so many hours of the day. So yes, so Monstera deliciosa here, you might be able to see right here is the plant that I was talking about on a previous video, which is the crown of thorns, and you can see quite how large it is. As I said, I'll do a section after I do the quick intro now where I'll show you the plants up close. There is, and I didn't realize my mother did this before she flew out, but there is, I think that was a Ficus benjamina. So the one that kind of looks like it's got kind of trailing leaves. And I'll give you a close up to that. They left in such a hurry for the airport that she didn't even clean up. See, it's not just me or us that do the whole, like, let's do some like plant chores and leave them halfway through and get distracted by something else. That she basically chopped back that entire plant there. And there's hardly, I don't think there's any, maybe there's one or two leaves left on there. And that will, she's done this over the years just in order to strengthen up that plant a bit more and get some new growth and keep it a bit more compact. Because otherwise, some of the other Ficus benjaminas that she's got in Cyprus, unfortunately, they're in a different house that I can't show you. But if you see right behind me how tall those plants are, they are twice the height. So, and she didn't do that for years. So now she's learned her lesson and she's chopping things back, basically. So behind, I don't know whether or not you might be able to see, there is a Sansevieria trifasciata, I think there. There's a hibiscus in the corner there, just underneath the light. There's a massive yucca that comes out from outside the balcony. And again, I'll show you close-ups of all these things. There is, I think that is a form of a Dracaena, but I will see about putting kind of Latin names at the top there. The second one is obviously a Dracaena as well, and you can see all the different branching that has happened there, because that would have been one head, but it's got multiples now, and it kind of gives that kind of slight palm-like feel to it, which is really cool. There is another Ficus benjamina at the back, the one that actually looks a bit like a tree. God bless my mother that she can actually grow those things. I have never been able to. They usually drop all the leaves for me. I know they can be quite tolerant, so we'll see. I might try in the future if I have any space. There is another yucca there that's a bit younger, and there is a boxes tree. So many years ago when I had a patisserie in the UK, I also tried my luck with a patisserie in Greece. And let's just say it was a challenge. For the people that are Greek that watch this channel, let's just say the only people that made any money from my business was the government, basically, and I closed that business down within 6 months. I will leave it at that. Over this side, and again, I'll bring you in for close-ups, so you probably won't be able to see them, but there are old planters, and this is what I love about my parents when they're dealing with their house plants, balcony plants most of the time. They will just reuse old pots. None of these look glamorous in any way or form, but this is my earliest, most visceral childhood memories. So for instance, there were some boxes plants that I had outside my patisserie. This was years ago. This was almost a decade ago, probably at this point. Those ones have died off. The only one that survived is the one right there in the corner. And my dad said, you know what, I quite like cyclamens. So there's a whole bunch of cyclamens there. He did say, just, oh, they'll come back next year. And I did warn him last year. I'm just like, I don't know if they will. I've not had the greatest success. And I did ask him when I came back this winter now and just went, oh, those ones, the ones that have come back. And he's like, no, I've had to rebuy. So I'm just like, okay. I did tell him, and I know this is less on the houseplant side of things, but more on the bulb side of things. He'd never heard of, I think it's called the lasagna way of planting bulbs, so that you've always got something of interest growing. So I think he's going to try that next year. And right behind the camera, there's only one plant, but I will show you that in the close-ups. I am pretty sure it's a colocasia. It might even be an alocasia, basically. I'm looking at the leaves and I'm thinking it might be an alocasia odorata. And it's a relatively established plant you'll see from the stems. But without further ado, let me pick you up and give you some close-ups of these plants. Right, so the first one you can kind of see here is the ivy that I was talking about that my mother has got. And it's doing okay. I mean, ivy generally, I find, will grow absolutely stonking anywhere. Also, apologies if there's a bit of mess and everything around. As I said, my parents had to leave quite soon, and I've not going to sit here and clean their balcony for them. They can do that when they get back. Then you've got the monstera that I was talking about here. And you can see there's a new leaf that's coming there and that's emerging, and that's fine. And that gives you an idea of the distance between the balcony and where the plant is. And you can see the kind of light levels are darker as well. And the ultimate of janky support sticks. Welcome to like generational growing of houseplants. That is an old broom handle for those that are wondering. But you can see this is a very, very happy plant. There's a new growth point there. Most of the leaves are doing quite well. They are particularly covered in dust, I think, at the moment. But yeah, as I said, this is a cutting from a mother plant. And you might be able to see, if I put my hand there, so you can see quite how thick that stem was. When it came over from Cyprus, it was a lot larger, basically. Now, coming on to, oh, my mother will kill me that I'm showing you this. I think this might be a bit overexposed. I'll see if I can fix it in editing, but this is her watering cans, old milk bottles, basically, and I don't even know what she uses. Welcome to like a Greek fertilizers. It literally translates to fertilizer for green plants with extra iron, basically, is what that is. But yeah, you can see here the crown of thorns, and you can even see some of the plant that was cut up from next to it, but you can see quite how large that is and sprawling, and she's always got it in bloom. This is a plant that I mentioned I tried taking a cutting and propagating, failed miserably after nearly 2 years of it being trying to propagate in soil. I'm just like, oh, it's done something probably now after 2 years. So I pulled it out and I'm just like, there is no roots. It looked no different. It was just like a stem and some leaves on the top. The leaves hadn't dropped. It even bloomed a couple of times, but it didn't grow any roots. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to buy a new one. And the video that I showcase mine, that is one that, or 3 mini plantlets that I bought, and I've used them together. Now, this is about Ficus benjamina that I was talking about there. And there you go. This is what I mean about like leaving your plant chores halfway done and it's absolutely stonking hysterical. So yeah, it's and it will grow back. That was the whole point of that. You can see behind it, if I kind of move there, you might be able to see the boxes tree that I was talking about just there. That was the last thing remaining from outside my old patisserie, and hopefully it will focus eventually. There you go. And it's doing okay. I don't think they were particularly enamored, or it's not a plant that they would have ever have grown, but because there were so many outside the shop, they eventually brought them to the balcony. I think they've managed to kill most of it off. Oh, I didn't realize there's a pothos there. There you go. There's the yucca that I was talking about, which is stunning. Yuccas will grow out in the gardens in Greece quite happily, and in Cyprus without it being too much of an issue. You can see the Ficus benjamina there. I'm pretty sure this Ficus benjamina here, I don't know about the yucca next to it, but the Ficus benjamina that's there is probably about a 10-year-old plant at this point, maybe a bit older. The pothos that I hadn't realized was because it was behind kind of seating. And there you go. It's not just me that does the janky support sticks. My mother also does janky like support like twine. But there's a pothos, which I'm assuming, knowing my mother, all she did with that pothos was literally take a cutting and basically just shove it in some soil and hope for the best. As I said, I think the Dracaena, I think that might be a marginata. I might be wrong. I'll see if I can add it onto the top. But that one is one that I would assume is about the same age as Ficus benjamina, maybe even a bit older, but you can kind of see the stem there, that it's kind of starting to look a bit like a tree. Again, this is something that's very common in both Cyprus and Greece because they will just grow as trees in the gardens, basically. So it is quite a useful thing to have as a houseplant. Now, moving you over, you might be able to see, and again, look at where the balcony is, look at where the sun is coming in, and that is where the Sansevieria is growing, and it's growing exceptionally happy. So take note, these plants generally are from, I think, somewhere in the Africa region, basically, originally, so they're fine here. Behind it is a hibiscus, and this hibiscus is probably a couple of years old at this point. You can see the other Dracaena there, which is growing quite large. Again, that the 2 Dracaenas and the Ficus there are probably about the same age. And then the other yucca that I was saying, I will tilt you up so you can kind of see where it's growing outside the balcony. I know it's getting blown out. I will see what I can do in editing. And moving you down below, you'll see what I mean about the cyclamens. And it's looking a bit barren, but you know, it's fine. It's my dad's plants. My dad loves his plants as much as my mum, but I think he's a bit less, he's more precious with like what he gets rather than my mother. I just want robust things that nothing will happen to them. So, so let me show you the last one, which is the alocasia / colocasia. I think it's an alocasia based on the leaves. And there you go. You might be able to see that plant. Oh my God, is getting so badly exposed. I'll see if I can fix this in post. I really hope I can. If not, I will add some B-roll. But yeah, you can see there is 1 corm, 2 corm, 3 And you can you see the thickness of some of those original corms that are now the stems of the plant? Can you see how tiny the leaves are? But that's the leaves of this plant when it's growing in the winter, and in the summer it will bush up. You can see some bleaching on the leaves potentially if I take you in a bit closer. Wow, that's really getting blown out. But they do live quite happily here on balconies.
Here you can see this is the house on the Peloponnese, and I found some interesting looking plants that look like they could be kind of closely related to begonias. I don't know exactly what they are because they were growing as weeds essentially. Here you can see again growing out in the wild, unfortunately massively overexposed, problem with light, but this is an opuntia, so this is a prickly pear cactus, and this is abundant throughout most regions of Greece and Cyprus. And there you can see the spines. I don't think this one has clawkids. A perfect example of very kind of traditional plants in Greece. So this is a geranium, and you should be able to see a close-up in a minute. There you go. And also some random wild oxalis growing within it. So moving on to Cyprus now, and we're starting with the quintessential plant my mother has in her house, which is an abundance of spider plants. And these have been growing very happily for a very long period of time. This is on a ledge close to the main spiral staircase that comes up to the bedrooms. And you can see all the little pups that are happening, and she's kind of using them here a bit as trailing plants. Now, continuing down the staircase, you will see one of the first syngoniums that my mother has. I think this might just be the standard kind of green syngonium as far as I'm aware, but it is definitely growing like a weed. And here you can see the other kind of area where she's got a syngonium. This was absolutely huge. I don't think the video is doing it any justice about how big the pot that it is in is. And you can see some of the close-ups here. Somebody who is heavily into syngoniums might know which one that one is. Here you can see the big mama jummer of a monstera. And right there at the back, I thought I'd include Julie, which is my parents' rescue gun dog in Cyprus. Julie is very nervous, bless her, but she's doing really well, and she was much better at not barking at me the entire time I was there this time around, which is good. And there you can see another propagation chop of that Monstera deliciosa. And the leaves are absolutely huge. I think at some point here soon you'll see my hand just in terms of relation for the leaf. There you go. You can that gives you an indication of quite how large that is. And right next to it, there's this plant. If anybody knows what this plant is, do let me know. My grandmother originally had this plant. This is probably 40 or 50-year-old plant at this point. My parents do not know what it is, so they can get more of it. Obviously, they can propagate this, but if anybody knows, do let us know. And I wasn't joking when I said about spider plants. This is now outside on the kind of veranda area. The volume of spider plants and all the babies is just insane. And you can see it up at the top, you can see it down here below. This is a form of cactus. I did ask whether or not this was a dragon fruit. Apparently it isn't. But yeah, you'll see another one of those. Then these are lilies, apparently, that my mother bought. I don't know what exact lilies they are. She didn't even know herself. There's some more of the crown of thorns. I think this is probably a chop and prop from the flat in Athens. More of that lily. This is something that she planted up and that they kind of told her was an anthurium, but she doesn't know any more than that. So anybody who knows what that might be, I know it's not very good of a screenshot, but hopefully you can let me know. This is a gardenia that she has growing on her kind of veranda. This is obviously something that she really loves. Um, don't know what this is. She couldn't even remember, but she chopped it back to come back in the summer. More of those huge lilies. I really do not know what they are at this point. There's another geranium there, more geraniums on the side, more of those spider plants growing exceptionally happy. I wasn't kidding when I said geraniums are everywhere. There's also, you might be able to see this trailing succulent type plant behind them, and that's something that's everywhere in Cyrus, but do not know. And then obviously another Dracena marginata. And continuing with the veranda, you can see more of that syngonium that our mother keeps propagating around the house, and you can see how it's trailing up that wall. There's a couple of smaller plants at the bottom. There you go. You can see that is a little palm, and you can see the watering device to get the water in deep. This is now the front of the house, the front entry. More of that syngonium intermixed with some of the spider plants, just because why not? Let's mix everything together. Like there's no hard and fast rules when people have been growing these for years. That's a Crassula ovata, and I'm pretty sure they just stuck some in the soil. You can see one's looking a bit limp on the side there, but it works. It's been working for them for years. More cuttings of that Monstera deliciosa from the kitchen. Because it gets too big and cumbersome, might as well chop a bit and put it in some more soil in a different pot. And then here you can see this is an asparagus fern, if I'm not mistaken, and it's growing outside in Cyprus very happily. That should tell you something about its tolerance to lower humidity levels. It does get quite humid at night, but not that much. Now you can see more of that cactus, that tropical cactus is climbing up. My mother always jokes about this, that this is the one thing her ex-husband gave her that she decided to keep because it does get quite huge. And yes, apparently this is not the dragon fruit cactus really. And you can see more of it here. This is a different section of the front door. And you can see how the aerial roots are attaching onto the house there. But very kind of prolific grower, like growing super, super well in Cyprus. And here you can see one of two of my mother's ponytail palms, which are growing in the ground. They're both quite young. I think they've only been in the ground for about a year or so now, but they're doing quite well. So that is the one, and you can kind of see the steps up that lead into the house there. And I was just fascinated by the fact that this was just growing happily outside. The second one is there, and you can see a big pot, the clay pot there. That I think is a mother of hundreds or a mother of thousands type succulent, heavily laden in blooms, because again, this is more of the environment that they're kind of used to. There's the secondary palm that I was talking about, the ponytail palm. Again, growing super, super healthily, happily outside, no problems. But again, climate. Climate is everything about potentially growing these outside. Now, some spectacular sago palms. But again, if I'm not mistaken, these kind of originate from kind of Africa. And if I'm not mistaken, and that is true, this makes sense because Cyprus is quite close to Africa. Sometimes it does share similar climates. So obviously if that grows there, it would grow, as you can see, quite happily outside in Cyprus. Now this I was bowled over. This is a white bird of paradise, a Strelitzia nicolai, if I'm not mistaken. There's also a massive palm there. I don't think that had any dates in it, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, and then again, you can see the bird of paradise, absolutely huge. Some of the stems have maybe died back or they've cut them back, but it is just growing like a weed. This isn't full sun, by the way. This is a south aspect in Cyprus, which means they get an awful lot of light. More succulents, I do not know specifically which one this is, but I think that's really beautiful. It kind of looks a bit like sticks, essentially. And you can kind of see, obviously, they still need to do a lot of weeding. This is obviously winter time. There's a very dead kind of Dracaena marginata in the background there. But again, some more close-ups of this stunning succulent. And you can see here what my mother did and just shoved a little corm of colocasia in the ground, and they're hoping within a year or two it's going to be big enough to harvest to eat. And finishing off, this is just a planter that they've essentially just filled up with aloe vera, which is great for them.
So yeah, that was a quick tour. Hopefully this is the end bit where I kind of wrap up, and hopefully I've added in different bits from the kind of holiday home in Greece as well, so you can see some of the house plants that are growing there and giving you some kind of voiceover over that, and some of the plants in Cyprus as well. But these plants have been here for donkey long, and they are doing fine. The soil conditions you might have been able to see for some of these plants, my mother just gets whatever soil she can get her hands on. I think some of these might even be in regular garden soil, but there's a lot of amendments that she'll do. If she can't find perlite, because perlite might be trickier for her to find over here, she'll just amend with sand, and that's fine. And this thing, we all need to remember that we're doing this after every other generation before us has probably done this. So they have found smart ways and easy ways for wherever they live and they're based in order to get these plants to thrive. Do not forget that. We are very fortunate in the fact that we've got all of these things that we can play around with, like the perlites, the vermiculites, the pon, the leca. I know the leca's been here for a while, but we've had decades worth of knowledge that has been passed down to us from things from our parents' generation where they've learnt on their own and figured things out on their own on how to do these things. I'm talking about times before the internet as well, where you just had to figure it out. And you're just like, I'm gonna try this. If it dies, it's fine. I'll get another one. So always good to remember that. And you can see that some of these plants using the same techniques. I am pretty sure if I told my mother half of the things that I do with my plants right now, she would think I'm insane. She's just like, why? It will just do this thing. You just need to give it some fertilizer, like if you remember, like once a year, and just remember to water it. And like half of these plants that I've shown you on this balcony get watered once or twice a day in the summer. Some of them need it. Some of them I'm questioning whether or not they do, but they all survive it somehow or another, basically. So be kind to yourselves, learn from the previous generations. I always get really frustrated when I get some of my viewers who might be slightly older than, like, say 20 or 30, because there's a lot of 20 or 30-year-olds that are watching sometimes, and they give tips on how they've grown plants for decades potentially. And everybody just like, oh, I don't know why you would do that. No, own the fact that you have grown your plants like this and you've done well, and the rest of the young'uns, shush and learn and maybe alter things if you wanted, but these people have done it successfully. Be respectful of that fact. Some of their plants are probably older than you, basically. So that's enough of me being on my soapbox. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. There will be the more standard content coming up after this video. I promise it will just be the one video of me showing you around here. And yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.